Wake up in the grind, clock ticking, 20 minutes flat, freedom main-handed, knives built where the real.
Welcome back to the 20-Minute Freedom Project. This show is for those who want ownership, discipline, freedom, and to build the life that's earned, not handed to them. I'm your host, Josh Lopez, and today's episode is the moment almost everyone hits, but almost nobody prepares for. It's the discipline wall. There's a moment that hits almost everybody who tries to change their life. You wake up, you look at the plan you were excited about last week, your goals, your habits, your structure, and a thought crosses your mind. Damn, this already feels hard. Not impossible and not overwhelming, just heavy. Way heavier than you expected. And this moment isn't dramatic. No breakdown, no explosion, no announcement. Comes out of nowhere. It's just a quiet thought that is just where most people quit without even saying they quit. They don't post about it. They don't tell anybody. They just slowly stop showing up. They skip a workout. They delay a task. They push it to tomorrow, then next week. This episode is about that moment, because that moment is not failure. It's the discipline wall showing its ugly head. I have hit that wall more times than I can count, and I will hit it over and over again. One of the clearest times when I committed to rebuilding and restructuring my life: early mornings, training when I didn't feel like it, consistent work blocks. The first week, I was fired up. The second week, still pretty solid. But then one morning, I woke up and felt nothing. I mean nothing. No excitement, no motivation, no drive to get it all done. There was no energy. Just a thought. What the hell's the point today? And that is a dangerous thought. Not as bad as I can't or this is impossible, but does it even matter? And that is the wall. And I remember sitting there. I could skip today and no one would know, but I would know. And that's when I realized something. The wall always shows up when no one is watching. You didn't tell anybody what you're doing. They haven't seen it yet. It just shows up in the most inopportune time. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is something you either have or you don't have. They look at disciplined people and say, they're built different. They're just more motivated. They don't struggle like I do. And that is bullshit. Disciplined people struggle the same way. The difference is simple. They don't interpret resistance as a stop sign or a reason to quit. Most people do. When effort starts to feel heavy, they assume something is wrong. Maybe I'm doing the wrong path. Maybe I'm not doing the right things. When motivation fades, they simply just assume that the plan is broken or they're on the wrong path. When discomfort shows up, they assume they need a reset, they need a rest, they need a balance. Sometimes that's true, but most of the time, that's the discipline wall doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's testing you, seeing what you actually really want to do. If what you said is what you're willing to do, and if you're willing to push through, there is a reframe that changes everything. Motivation starts transformations, but discipline completes them. Motivation gets you all hyped and excited. Discipline keeps you moving when that excitement disappears. That moment when you think, I don't feel like this anymore. That's not a sign you should stop. That's the exact moment discipline is required. The wall doesn't show up at the beginning. It shows up once the novelty has faded and the identity shift has started to become real. And your nervous system is pushing back, not because you're weak, but because you're changing the patterns it's so used to, and it doesn't like change. Let's define the discipline wall clearly so we can all understand what it is. The discipline wall is the point where emotion is no longer supporting your actions. Your old patterns start fighting back. Your old comforts, your new standards haven't been fully set yet. And so there's that little gap in the middle. And you're stuck between two identities, your old version and the new version that you are fully looking for. But it's not fully built out yet, and you haven't embodied it. That gap is very, very uncomfortable. And your brain hates that gap because it doesn't know what to do with it. It's so used to the old you, and it hasn't fully adopted the new you yet. So it tries to close the gap by pulling you backwards. If you understand these phases, you stop panicking when the wall hits. Phase 1 is the emotional dip. This is where your emotional or your optimism and your enthusiasm drops. You don't feel inspired. You don't feel driven. You don't feel rewarded. You feel flat. This is where most people start questioning everything. And is this worth it? Why did this feel so much easier last week or yesterday or last month? Am I pushing too hard? Truth is, nothing is freaking wrong. You've just lost the emotional fuel from the motivation. And that's normal. The second phase is the pattern fight. This is the real battle. Old habits start calling. Old routines feel comfortable again. Old excuses suddenly sound logical. You start craving more rest, more comfort. The old habits, you want more flexibility, more balance, not because you need it, but because the old pattern wants to survive, and your brain is wired to survive. This phase feels like irritation and restlessness and overthinking, procrastination dressed up as logic. This is where most people diagnose the problem. They think they need motivation, but what they actually need is non-negotiated action. Phase 3 is your identity starts rising. This is the point, and it's quiet. There's no hype. There's no fireworks. You stop arguing with yourself. You start doing things because that's what you do now. Discipline stops feeling like you're forcing it every day and starts feeling like it's aligned with what you're doing. Not because it's easy, but because it's expected of you. This is where your identity actually changes. The fourth phase is the compounding return. This is where results stack, one upon the other, and then the next one, and the next one. Not massive wins, not overnight success, but you start gaining momentum. You start trusting yourself again. The resistance loses volume, and it starts quieting down in your mind. Your follow-through becomes familiar. The work doesn't feel magical, it feels inevitable. And that's where your power lies. When most people hit that wall, they do one of two things. They retreat or they overcorrect. They either quit quietly or burning themselves out trying to power through. Both are missing the point. The wall isn't meant to be smashed. It's meant to be crossed deliberately. And that's where the 10-minute rule comes in. You've been doing so well up to this point because you had the motivation. Now you need to push through and actually build more of a deliberate discipline. And that's where the 10-minute rule is very handy. And the rule is very simple. You commit to starting, not finishing, not crushing it, not becoming perfect, but starting. And you use 10 minutes to start. There is no negotiation. Here's why it works. The brain resists beginnings, not continuations, because once it gets comfortable with something, it is more apt to continue doing that than getting the ball rolling. It's the same thing as when, if you ever had to push a vehicle, getting it rolling is the hardest part. Once you get it rolling, it becomes easier. And once you're in motion, the friction drops. Action creates clarity. Here's what most people get wrong. The 10-minute rule is not permission to quit after those 10 minutes. It's the permission to start. You can stop after those 10 minutes, but most of the time, you won't. And even if you do, you still won. You started. You crossed that wall. You began. You started for 10 minutes. And at the very least, you got 10 minutes into it. Discipline is not intensity. It is reliability. It shows up when emotion is completely absent. It's executing without drama. It does the right next thing quietly. Discipline doesn't post. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It accumulates actions over time. And over time, it changes who you are. This is the part where you're going to check yourself. You're going to stand in front of a mirror and look yourself in the eye. Or you're going to sit down with no distractions with a pen and a notepad. You're going to be brutally honest with yourself, and you're going to ask these questions. Where have you been waiting to feel ready? Where have you been calling avoidance self-care? What standard did you quietly lower? Who is paying for your lack of discipline? You're not going to judge yourself. You're just going to write down the brutal truth to those questions. Because discipline begins with honesty and measuring where you are. Here's your freedom challenge. 3 days, one goal, one behavior. For 3 days straight, you are going to apply the 10-minute rule. Start no matter how you feel. Do not negotiate. If you miss a day, restart. There's no guilt, no stories. Don't make up some excuse. This isn't about pushing through everything. This is about the results that you actually accomplish. It's about the exposure. You're teaching your nervous system that we act when we don't feel like it. That is discipline. And when you reach the 3rd day, you could stop. But you have already made those steps in the right direction. So why don't you do another 3 days? And then another. And then another. I have mentioned this before when you go on a run. And everything feels easy at first. And then the wall hits you. That's when you start setting milestones for yourself. One more mailbox, or make it to the power pole. Then you reach it, and then you set another, and then another, and then another, until either you stop worrying about it, or you just push through. You don't stop when you reach the objective. You reset and shoot for the next one. The reality is, though, the wall is never going away. It's part of your growth. You can let it stop you, or you can let it shape you. Discipline isn't something you wait for. It's something you practice, time after time after time. And every time you act without motivation, you build a version of yourself that doesn't need it. If this episode made you think or gave you a new perspective, share it out with someone who needs it. And remember, freedom isn't found, it's built through discipline, ownership, and action. Take one of those steps today to gain your freedom. and I will catch you guys on the next one.